Start with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, so the roll call, Carol. Here.
Charles Benudo.
Present.
John Byron.
Yo.
Amy Taranto.
Here.
John Windsor.
Here.
Terry Castel.
Here.
David Lane.
Here.
Stephanie Healy. Here. John Durkee.
Here.
Wendy Barker. Here. Todd Sweeney.
Here.
Gina Souza. Danielle Bowden.
Here.
And Karen Catherine has asked to be excused. She's out of town assisting family. And we have quorum.
Okay, great, thank you. Approval of the agenda. Any comments or changes to the agenda? We have a lot to cover to actually be able to leave at 10 o'clock, so we want to wrap up around 9:45 so we can have public comment as well. So do I hear a motion?
I move to approve the agenda and the minutes.
Second. Third.
Third.
Just by there.
Okay, all those in favor to approve the agenda and the minutes, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? The motion passes. We'll move on to reports.
Okay, thank you. I want to start with one thing that's not on the progress report, which is Brandon Smith is one of the 12 finalists for Lead Brevard's 4 Under 40. We waited a long time to get him, but I'm sure he's going to serve our program well, so I just wanted to recognize him for that. Rockledge Breeze Swept Septic to Sewer project is finished. So that's really super. 142 homes hooked up to sewer. The MIMS muck dredging project, they've begun mobilization. There's equipment on the site. So they'll be working on building the dredge material management area first and then bring in the dredge to remove the muck. Sykes Creek dredging pre-bid was November 2nd, and bids are due December 6th, so we're looking forward to seeing how those bids come in. Muck Finders, they did their final campaign that was funded by grant funds in Newfound Harbor, and staff has looked at the prior field campaign around Mathers and compared that to data that we had collected by professional surveyors, and it's a very good match. So we're going to do the same thing with the Newfound Harbor data, but I think we've got a good method that's going to help us fine-tune our dredging templates going forward. Preliminary design for the Miko septic sewer project is complete, so we're now working on final design. We have a few more city contracts fully executed, and those projects are underway. We've requested scopes of work from the cities, not just for the year 1 projects, but also for year 2 and 3 projects if they're ready to move forward ahead of schedule, the way we had talked about. Since the dollars are coming in faster, let's accelerate those projects. The rest of these sort of speak for themselves under work completed. I'm going to jump down to work underway this month, a few highlights. The muck dredging master plan task order that you all considered at your last meeting, that's going to the county commission for approval on Tuesday. Similarly, the Turkey Creek post-Irma muck removal cleanup project, that's also going to the county commission on Tuesday. We submitted Florida legislative funding requests exceeding $55 million for the coming session to match the $60 million that we have budgeted for projects in that state fiscal year. Those projects are being sponsored by Coach P, Renee Placencia, and Thad Altman, and Randy Fine, and Senator Mayfield. So we're really excited about those requests. We'll see what happens. I'm sure it's going to be a crazy session as usual. And just yesterday, I think it was yesterday, the monitoring wells at the Long Point Park project were installed. So we're excited to be able to start measuring the effectiveness of that project, which was the first of our lagoon projects completed. Then under meetings that occurred in the previous month, the first one, we've had our first kickoff meeting with the Marine Resources Council for the $1 million groundwater research project that's funded by the legislature. And so we're in the business of selecting the neighborhoods and getting a good distribution of sampling areas across the county and across soil types and across land use and sewage treatment types. So that is all on track. Questions, comments?
Your first item there, analysis of potential use of lagoon trust funds to help address sewage overflow projects. We got a pretty solid lagoon plan, pretty much case hardened. I would suggest that anything that might, first of all, there are alternate sources of funding for this that are more appropriate, perhaps. And there's a lot of folks scratching around for new money. But if there is some mechanism where it's appropriate for us to deal with it, I would suggest this not come out of the baseline funding of the lagoon plan, but rather be targeted against excess sales tax revenues above the plan levels, that it shouldn't compete with already approved projects that may be a place to put the extra money we're getting if it comes to that. Just a thought.
Okay, we'll be talking about that, the staff recommendations later in the agenda. Okay, so is that the end of your report?
Move to the financial statements?
Sure.
Before you get there, any progress on the irrigation well testing kits?
Yes. Staff has been researching all the different kinds of kits that are available, whether it's the test strips or titration, chemicals, add and swish around and compare colors to color charts versus expensive, box units that read the color. And the problem is that at the levels that we need to measure, the concentrations that we anticipate needing to measure are much lower than the concentrations that are typically experienced in an aquarium. And so the accuracy and the fine tuning that we need currently does not appear to be available in any of the test kits that we've been able to get the manufacturers to respond to us on the accuracy in those low levels. So we're continuing to contact more vendors and see if there is something out there, but it's not looking likely at the moment.
And maybe there are some students at a project that could take this thing on and come up with an idea, an inexpensive solution.
This is quant chemistry.
One of my suggestions last week was, Marine Resources Council has quite a large water quality monitoring program, and they have some higher tech equipment, and so maybe we could partner with them to at least field test the committee's idea of testing well water and see if that would work.
Okay. Thank you.
All right, so the fiscal year 2017 report, you'll see that the first line there in tax revenue, the actual year to date is now 27.89 million. We expect one more month of revenue coming in from last fiscal year, and so we expect this number to be fairly close to 32 million, just under 32 million at the end of the day. And I just wanted to note that the the operating expense line in the second yellow block, the operating expense line that shows the actuals of 88,758, 50,000 of that is the annual membership that is paid to the Indian River Lagoon National Estuary Program for the ordinance that established the lagoon tax, and the other was mostly Tetra Tech support for revising the plan to incorporate the 42 projects and those other updates that we made.
Are you getting enough actual, factual to adjust the line items in next year's budget and follow-on budgets? I mean, you're grossly underspending in operating expenses right now, for example. Can that funding be applied to something else based on experience?
You know, yes,
Thank you.
yes.
Okay, I hate to bring up something, $50,000 to the NEP for the annual dues. Didn't Brevard County agree to pay those dues before the referendum?
We did pay them one time from stormwater funds before the referendum. But the referendum ordinance actually stipulated that that would be the source of those revenues going forward.
Okay.
So the 2018 financial statement, you can see that we have a number of projects contracted. We're still working on getting many more of those contracted. For the most part, it's the year zero projects that are contracted, and the year one ones we're still in negotiations on scopes of work with the cities, but hopefully you'll see a lot of these filling in.
So on operating expenses with total assigned of 44,000, we're not including that 50,000.
Right. Right. It hasn't been paid yet, and there's not a PO that would encumber it yet.
Okay.
But then that would look to short Tetra Tech's involvement with the Lagoon plan. If I throw that 50K in there, I'm up,
To 95.
I've got $1,500 left to pay Tetra Tech.
There,
Not necessarily, John, the 44 that's budgeted in there might be the Tetra Tech money.
Could be.
yeah,
Okay.
that's
fair. That's fair. Thank you.
That's
Thank
the
you.
remainder of their
Yeah, okay.
purchase
Okay.
order,
Okay.
Thank you.
which is hopefully enough. If it's short, we have the ability to slide some money around.
Virginia, on the line chart that shows the revenues cumulative, there's two green parts, there's like a lower green line that breaks out in a higher, is that a mistake? Is that lower one supposed to be
You're
red?
colorblind.
Am I colorblind?
Yeah, you are. 10% of American males are colorblind. This is
Count me
the
in the
actual.
10%.
This one's actual, and this one is.
Right, but
Yeah,
it's
supposed to
green
be.
there, isn't it?
It's red here.
Yeah, isn't it supposed to be red?
Yeah.
The zigzag line that's between the top line and the bottom line should be red.
Okay.
Sort of.
So am I colorblind? Did
no,
we
you're
find
not.
out?
No.
Okay,
Not in the red spectrum.
Right around June.
right. But it shouldn't, right?
Really? Mine's red. Okay.
Not in the red
Well,
spectrum.
we'll see if we can pick a
Colorblind is
different
green
color.
spectrum.
Okay, that sounds good.
I bet it's different on a phone. Yeah.
Huh, okay.
Yeah, because I look at my agenda on the phone too.
Okay.
Mine's red.
The printer's
Crystal, you got
colorblind,
that?
that's the problem.
We need a different color.
No, then it goes to green.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we need to check it online and make sure that the online version is
Yeah.
visible.
God, all these big problems. I love it.
I have CSM.
Does that conclude the audit report?
Ready for the audit report.
Okay, great.
So Jill Reyes is the director of RSM, and she's the internal auditing, the external firm that provides internal auditing for the county. And she presented to the audit committee on the Lagoon funding a week and a half ago-ish. And- Okay. So I thought it'd be nice for you to hear that report.
Good morning, everyone. I think we met once before when we first agreed with the audit committee when they asked us to come and kind of attend your meetings every month. And I have with me today Craig Romanek. He's been at all of your meetings since, well, except one, I think, since you guys began meeting, and he just kind of observes and comes back and brings us information. And then we've been meeting with staff, both in natural resource management and finance and budget, to kind of understand the dollars and where they're going and what the plan is and how the plan changes as the revenues exceed expectations. And as an auditor and an accountant, I'm so super excited to hear you guys talking about underfunding and green lines and red lines and colorblind and what's happening. So this is the first report that we presented to the audit committee. We will probably present another one to them in February at the next meeting, and then we'll maybe go to semi-annual, but we're going to kind of watch and see how the projects evolve. You know, our internal audit plan is fairly robust, so we don't want to overwhelm them with a lot of information, but we will continue to keep them informed. The first several slides are, if I can figure, yep, really just some background information for the audit committee and the general public who may read this report on the ordinance itself, the tax, and how it was passed. Let me see if I can, there we go. Get this to here?
Yeah, try the second.
This one?
Yes.
There we go, sorry. Give them a little bit of history on why the tax was implemented and just sort of remind them. So in the essence of time, I know you all are very intimately familiar with this information, so we're gonna just kind of scroll through. We did give them some background on you, the committee itself, where you're from, who you are, how often you meet, and what your roles and responsibilities are in your bylaws. Some information on the plan. This lovely graphic that I stole from your website, which I love. And then if we could just go to page 9, which is really where we spent a lot of time discussing with the audit committee, and I'll share with you some of the questions that they had. As Virginia just mentioned, you are ahead of revenue as expected. Expected to get to about $32 million once the September revenues are received in later this month. And then next year's budget, or this year's budget, is currently $34 million. And with the trend from last year, there's somewhat of an expectation that it's anticipated to be exceeded, but obviously seasonality and, you know, consumer choices, we just have to watch that as it goes. So we'll continue to look at that. The cost-sharing contracts, we sort of explained to them how that works. Year 0, year 1 was a little bit confusing, but we kind of got through that discussion and explained how where that process is today. And then we spent some time talking about tracking the dollars. Once the funding really gets going and the cost-sharing contracts and the partners start asking for refunds and what will happen and how the county tracks those costs by project. And so we've spent, and as internal auditors, a lot of time in public works and other departments of the county to understand how the SAP system works to track projects. And so from that experience, we sat down with budget and finance and natural resource management to better understand the difference between how a county project will be tracked and how a municipal partner project will be tracked. It is a little bit different. It's not as easy as it sounds, and we really, really want to not rely on spreadsheets. If we can use the system, let's use it as best we can. So we spent a lot of time going through that. If you have any specific questions on how that works, I'm happy to entertain those. But basically, we're going to monitor the dollars as they start being spent. And to date, at least the date of this report, there were no payments made to any municipal partners. So I don't know if that's changed, but because none of that has happened, there really isn't anything to audit yet. So we're just going to keep watching it. I just shared with Crystal, who I'm sure is very excited, that in January, we will come in and start looking at some of these projects that have been completed, whether they're county projects or municipal partner projects, and kind of walk it through this audit trail, if you will, and see how everything was set up in SAP and what reports are available and that kind of thing. And then as those contracts are executed, the funds will be encumbered, your financial reports will get updated, and you'll start to see that those dollars change. One area that we really spent some time on, and you guys have already touched on it today, really goes back to the operations and maintenance dollars. That part of the ordinance is very vague, and it's intentionally that way to allow for flexibility. Unfortunately, that also creates an area where there's some exposure for allegations of misuse, fraud, that kind of thing. So we spend, as internal auditors, as well as management, I'm sure, a lot of time trying to make sure that whatever goes into that bucket is something that you can justify as a true expense that's allowed under that provision of the ordinance and the tax. Different from grant money, but similar in the sense that a lot of folks will track it by, well, what percentage of your costs has gone into operations and maintenance? How are you defining that? What is respond money? You've set aside $1 million a year. What does that mean? What are you going to put in that bucket? And those are all decisions that you all, with Natural Resource Management, and will make. We're just going to follow how those decisions are made and the accounting that goes with it. So we're here to help give recommendations along the way, and then hope that once the dollars get spent, they've been properly allocated. We did also inform the committee about the staff, the 6 staff that were approved by the commissioners, and that 5 of those positions had been filled. I think 1 started the day before the meeting. So, and then that 6th position is in hold. Those positions, as you know, are fully funded by the tax, and so one of the things we talked about, similar to when organizations receive grant money, if you have someone that's fully funded by a special revenue source, you have those people fill out, at least annually, but we've been talking about maybe more frequently, an affidavit of sorts that says, yes, I spend 100% of my time working on this, as opposed to other county initiatives. We are all competing for dollars, and there are priorities, and you'll go, oh, let me see if that person's available to help me on X. Well, because these people are fully funded by the tax, we want to make sure that that's not happening, and if it is happening, that that portion of their salary is not being funded by the tax. The other side.
Question?
Yes, ma'am.
John?
Oh, I'm sorry.
How do we account for employees, I'm looking at Matt, who are fully funded by the county but are spending an extraordinary amount of time on this project?
It's a great question. It actually came up at the audit committee meeting, and my understanding, and Virginia can expound on this a little bit, is that those folks that were already employed by the county are still being funded by whatever revenue source, be it general revenue or some other fund, as they were before.
Well, no, I understand that, but are we accounting for their efforts and energy as
Yeah.
a contribution in some way to the fund?
Not currently, I don't believe, and that is one of the points that we brought up here in items to consider in the second bullet point, where it says, how does or should the county track and expense the time of existing county people that support the program, such as those in natural resource management or even finance and budget? Is any of their time allocable to the trust? Should it be, or should you just be tracking it so that if it becomes a material amount of money and you have excess tax, is that something that can be allocable to the trust?
Yeah, I mean,
And
in a lot of our other types of funding sources, that's what we do, is we track their time, as you probably know, where they write their hours down that they work on certain aspects, and then we pay that percentage out of, that applicable funding source. So I mean, I would agree that if we get to a point where we have additional funds that need to be allocated, that we do offset some of the county's expenses that go to this, particularly for staff members' time that we, that they're paying for now, that they weren't envisioning having to fund.
And I think go ahead.
Well, now's probably not the time for debate on that, but I think that's definitely an item that needs a lot of discussion, because it's, that's one of the common accusations, and probably accurate accusations when new funding sources are established, that it simply is a shift of government funds from one place to the other, and I think we've got to be really, really careful of that, particularly if it was envisioned that there's, I don't know that there's a clear black line between what the county was already doing, because there certainly were efforts, and this was intended to be supplemental, so I think it's just warrants some very close scrutiny on our part on how any funding allocation would occur, because I think that is very ripe for concern from the citizens.
So my intent, unless directed otherwise, was to try to keep it as very black and white as possible. The 6 positions specifically approved for support by the trust fund are paid by the trust fund, everybody else is paid by however their positions were funded before. The one exception that I would say to this is that every county employee, as part of their employment agreement, is that they provide emergency services. So we just went through a hurricane, and I had Lagoon employees who were working the EOC or called into shelters. They did what every single county employee is mandated to do as terms of their employment. And, you know, when the phone rings, oh, I'm sorry, we're not going to help you because I only answer questions about Lagoon, that's not going to play well. So we can add some sort of statement to timesheets, but we'll have to have some sort of disclaimer that it's not 100%.
Sure.
Since the topic is over, this caught my attention. The county has an HR system, it has position descriptions, it has timesheets, it has allocation of hours, and I think that the 6 billets of 5 employees who are being funded by this particular source, which is not a grant,
Right.
should be treated like every other FTE in the county. Yes, there ought to be a scrupulous accounting. Yes, it needs to be defensible, but I think this is a step too far at this time. If there's problems, let's deal with them. Let's not create them.
And to be clear, I'm not suggesting that we use these funds as a cost shift to supplement, but if we are accounting for time and expenses, we should account for time and expenses for current staff that are working specifically the times they work on these projects. That's all. Not necessarily shifting the payment.
Yeah, we're not, and just to be, for us to be clear as well, we're not making that recommendation. We're just saying these are things you should be considering and discussing. It actually was a question that came up from the audit committee on how the municipal partners are, if they're shifting dollars. And it's our understanding that right now, the contracts and the scopes of work really just are for project costs and contractor costs, and no indirect costs are associated with that. So that keeps it as simple as possible, which is good. We just want to make sure that that groundwork has been laid. So really, this is just a discussion. We're not making any recommendations. We're saying that you should consider it. You don't necessarily have to do it. You've considered it as a committee. That's your role.
Well, you should be aware that this committee very aggressively went at specifically this issue, recommended changes to the Lagoon plan that deal exactly with the problem of potential fund shifting from previously fronted on this line item, now we're going to get Lagoon money. I think it is, thanks to the county attorney's rapid work during a coffee break, we managed to pin that down. I think that's tight.
Good, great. So then the next steps really for what we'll do is we will continue to attend these meetings as you have them. As the contracts are executed and costs accumulated, we'll begin to review that SAP setup and how the reporting and project tracking is done, and make recommendations if we feel there's anything that else that could be in there. Certainly, as you start to see those reports, if you have any requests, I'm sure Virginia wants to entertain those to give you the level of reports that you'd like to see. And then as those project reimbursement requests come in from the partners, we'll take a look at what management's done to ensure that all the paperwork and controls and reviews and approvals have been obtained before the money has been spent. So we're just going to keep be around, right, and report to the audit committee as frequently as they ask us to. Again, at this point, this is the first one, and we will probably do another meeting with them February, which would be on the quarter, only to look at the finance side now that the setups are going to happen, and then we'll see where it goes from there.
I didn't understand if this was already presented to the audit committee.
Yes.
Is it available online, the report?
It is.
It is
yes.
online? Do we have it linked to?
It was in your agenda packet, I believe, and then Pam Barrett in the...
It is in the agenda package, which is online.
In the, all of our audit reports are put online, internal audit reports.
To our Lagoon site?
It's actually there. If you look under...
But it's through the agenda packet.
Oh,
so-
I understand. Okay.
But yeah, if you want to break it out separately.
Yeah.
People in my world aren't diving into the minutia of the committee. So I was thinking a link, on the left sidebar that was just titled Internal Audit Report. would be a great way for people like us to share that across social media, because that's a recurring question almost daily. You know, you guys are overseeing the lagoon, who's overseeing you, kind of thing. So a quick link like that, I think, would be a great way for us to at least send them somewhere to get them out of our hair.
It will also be, I'm sure, a part of your external audit as well, that, you know, your external auditors do when your county CAFR comes out. But we're before that process, so we kind of look at process and controls along the way, and then make recommendations to tighten those and strengthen those controls if as needed. And then we look to you to make those management decisions. So if there are no questions.
Okay.
Comment.
Yes.
I've seen a lot of audit reports in my lifetime, unfortunately. This one compares very favorably for the depth of your understanding of what we're doing. It is unusual in one aspect. It's not signed. And I would suggest that that would be a good thing to do.
Mine is signed. Page
No,
page one?
it's got a block lettering by hand of the name of the organization.
Yeah. That's how we sign off. That's even how we sign our external audit documents, but I appreciate the comment. Thank you.
Okay.
Any other questions?
Anything else? Thank you, Jill.
Thank you.
And the next, we go to old business, and Christine.
Yes,
Share
we
with
have the
us.
fact-finding field trip coming up, and I just wanted to remind you that while this is open to the public, and I understand we have members of press and public either riding with you or meeting you at the FOWA site, this is a different type of meeting than what you're used to. It's not a meeting to discuss any business whatsoever relating to the Lagoon Committee. It's purely informational, and any observations about how you would apply that information to the projects you should consider should be brought back and discussed at the committee. So, do you have any questions?
Specific or in general? I mean, my understanding is the whole notion of making this trip is to understand the technology and how it might be used in general to deal with the septic to sewer problem.
Right, in
As
general.
long as we're not talking about specific this site or that site.
Or your preferences for whatever technology well, there's different types of technology available that you'll see being tested at this location, so.
So if I see
They
a
can
techno-
ask.
You
Any
can ask in
questions you
general,
want.
but how, your opinion of how you would apply that to any particular projects, that should be
I can't say I like
discussed
this better
in the.
than I like that.
I would not, no.
But we're in an open, the press is there.
It's not a
We're in-
public meeting for business.
So a field trip is not this field trip is not a public meeting.
It is not a meeting to discuss business that comes or could come before the Lagoon Committee.
There's no minutes.
It's
being
informational.
taken. There's people there, but there's no minutes being taken. It doesn't qualify like a meeting like this. So just ask questions, but don't express your opinions. I mean, just talk about your dog and your house and stuff like that. Don't-
Thanksgiving.
I'm just being honest, just don't.
But if John does what John is prone to do, which is a good thing.
He's already under the bus? Is that, we
I'm
haven't
pointing to
on
John,
the
so
bus,
you
he's
don't
under it
point
already?
at me. So here, I just want to throw this out, right? I don't want to make a big deal about this, but the very fact that one of us questions this particular technology and challenges maybe the assertions made about its efficiency or whatever is sort of, ipso facto, a preference. I'm not challenging this one over here. You understand what I'm saying? I'm just trying to say, John is going to ask questions about this technology. I don't want John to get in trouble, implying a preference because he challenges one and not the other.
But John challenges everything.
Oh, okay. Good deal. Here's the deal. Whatever you challenge, I'll challenge the other one. All right, okay, I'm done.
Okay.
Thank you.
And Christine, are you also the fact-finding committee? The next item on the agenda?
That's a task for the committee to designate which members of the COC are going to be attending the field trip.
Okay. And for that committee, Virginia, so are we providing a written report? I mean, what are the responsibilities of the fact-finding committee? Or is the fact-finding committee just all of the members that are attending?
We just envisioned all of the members who want to attend would be named by the committee to attend and
Oh,
find
okay.
facts.
Okay. And is
I move
who is attending?
that we appoint a fact-finding committee of all the people that raise their hands that they're going on the trip. Who's going?
Okay. And do we have a second?
Second.
Okay. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye, opposed? Okay, the motion passes. And move on to item number 3. Vinnie?
Okay. Well, I know David was looking at me when he had suggestions for website. No, it's good because we now have Brandon Smith. So as much as I've loved my responsibilities of being in charge of communications,
As much as we appreciate that.
I will now gladly hand over the keys to the VW van to Brandon. And he can, obviously, we'll be working together on future stuff, but he's done a great job, and he's going to give you a little bit of what he's done so far.
Yeah, so I just went through the training through our IT department to be able to administer changes to the website, so I'll be working on that from now on. And we also started several social media sites, so I want to go over these real quick. We have our Facebook site up, so it's at facebook.com/Brevard County Save Our Lagoon, and we even had some Facebook Live posts. I already posted about the meeting today that was going on, and they could live stream it. And we did some Facebook Live posts of our well digging yesterday and a lot of other information. So we'll be putting updates on there. We have an Instagram account that is also up for pictures and linked to the Facebook account, so it'll automatically post there. And we'll be putting the videos that we'll be seeing a little later today onto our YouTube page as well. So we have the 2 previous videos up there already, but we didn't want anyone getting a sneak peek before you guys got a chance to see them. So after you see them, we'll put those up there.
Great. Questions? Okay.
How well has the availability of all this information been advertised to the public? That should be another piece of outreach.
Yes, we are trying to get the information out there. We already have, with our Facebook page, we've had a few different organizations sharing it out there. So University of Florida IFAS, the Indian River Lagoon Coalition, the Brevard County Master Naturalists. So they've been sharing that information out there. We're going to put together a plan to get different organizations to help share this content and get that out.
I would suggest a dialogue with Jim Waymer.
Yes. Yeah, I'm very familiar with Jim, and we'll be in touch with him regularly too.
How closely will the Facebook page and our Brevard County page, same look and feel, same content, or what's going to be different?
So, yeah, this will be site. We'll actually be moving over the Citizen Oversight Committee archive videos to here, so people can go there for that. We will also, try to post any of the projects that are going on. I'm going to try to get out in the field to those when they're going on to be able to get that information out there. And anytime we have other updates as far as, the budget or anything like that, those will all be going on here as well. We'll be sharing all of that.
Terry, if your question is asking kind of the social media aspect versus the website, the way that I see it, the way that we talked about it here, the way it's usually done in the industry is your website is kind of your library, your archive. That's where all your data is going to sit. Your social media is almost kind of like your conduit. It's the way to reach out and grab people, introduce them to your information, and then of course it's got our web page listed on there that they can go and dig deeper if they want to. So this is kind of the avenue, the transit to grab people, pull them in, and then they can find resources. And you can always go to the website to find the total.
That's kind of my thought. I mean, I like the way you said it. I don't know if it's I would elevate it to a concern or not, but you can choke this Facebook channel, right, by putting too much stuff out there. So the notion of putting, kind of the hot topic of the day or what's going on, or just making a post that says, hey, go take a look at the website because there's something of interest there, as opposed to trying to mirror the image and mirror the data in both places.
Yeah, no, it's not going to be mirrored. We'll have different content on there, but we'll highlight when we do updates and things, so people can go to the website.
Yeah, good. I like it.
Thank you.
Craig?
Do we contact Brandon directly or
Yes,
contact
please.
you? Okay.
Yeah, so if you have ideas of who else would share this information, please reach out to Brandon directly.
And my second question is sort of a crossover maybe to the lawyer and Brandon both. Is anything that you're going to be posting on there something we shouldn't share? I think as soon as something comes up on there and I like it, I think I want to share it with everybody I know. But I'm concerned that there might be something there that I would be doing that would be in some violation of this committee. And so that, you know, most of the stuff Brandon's going to post, like the well drilling yesterday, I thought that was really cool, and I wanted to share that with everybody that I work with.
Well, from a legal perspective, you don't want to post anything that would be communication back and forth with another committee member. Otherwise, it's all public record.
I mean, but by you sharing it, you're not endorsing it. It's
Okay.
more of an information. If you shared something and said, I will approve this at any meeting in the future, that you might start getting into some bad stuff, especially if John then said, no, I'm entirely against you. Then we definitely would have a problem. But by the act of sharing alone.
No,
is-
John would have a problem. I wouldn't.
Exactly. Excuse me, yes, John would have a problem. Well, I said John, you're both John, so one of you guys would have a problem. The act of sharing alone, in my opinion, from what I've read legally, is not an endorsement of what you're sharing.
Okay.
Is that correct?
Is that accurate? Because it seems an implied endorsement when one shares.
Well, I'm concerned about sunshine law violations. So whether you're concerned about how you're perceived through your posting is not a legal concern for me. That's more for you. But you can't respond back and forth as committee members.
Okay, because they just had this issue come up down in South Florida on a similar water board. We cannot communicate between ourselves on Facebook or social media or
In person
or anything like that.
Right.
But just to share what he puts up there with the world is an okay thing.
That's an okay thing. So if there's any discussion to be had in response to that posting, it's in a public meeting.
Okay. Very good. Thank you.
Okay,
Should
great.
our posts be made public?
They are public.
Or Facebook?
No, I mean, mine aren't. Mine
You,
are friends only.
if it's open to the public, it's public.
Okay.
Well, you
The
can make
original posting is on the public.
It's a matter of public interest. Anybody can see it.
No, I mean like my personal.
Yes,
Okay.
yes.
Make it.
Technology, law hasn't caught up with technology yet again.
Yeah.
Oh, but it is with Facebook. That's-
Okay,
Yes.
okay. Vinnie, anything else? Or are we,
No, I think that's it.
thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, moving on to the stormwater cost share for substitute projects. Do you want to set that up and?
Right, so this has been a journey. As you recall, we had a request from some cities to look at differentiating the cost of stormwater projects based on where we were and where those projects would be located. And in the Lagoon plan, there's table 26 that calculated the average cost per pound of nitrogen removed by projects that would reduce the nutrient loading to the Banana River versus the North Indian River Lagoon versus the Central Indian River Lagoon. And so the committee previously considered this and made a recommendation to move towards this differentiation. Staff wrote that up, took it to the county commission for approval, and the county commission was not comfortable with that recommendation and sent it back to you for further thought. So at your last meeting, you asked staff to look at, well, maybe it's not, the costs are more specific to island costs versus mainland costs, the size of the basins that are being treated. And so we looked at the cost for mainland projects versus Merritt Island versus the Barrier Island. And so in those calculations that the mainland came up as $88 a pound, Merritt Island is $89 a pound, and the Barrier Island at just under $99 a pound. As soon as I received this table, I said, well, how in the world can they cost 88, 89, and 99 if the average cost was previously 88? There's something wrong in the math. And so we went back to the plan, and what happened was that whoever was assisting Tetra Tech with putting totals on the tables calculated a simple average of 96, 92, and 77 and got 88, instead of looking at the total cost of stormwater projects is 10.8 million, the total pounds of nitrogen removed is 118,000, which comes out to $91 a pound. So the actual countywide average cost is $91 a pound, and so, you know, we can, whether you want to differentiate between $88 in one part of the county and $99 in another, or whether you just want to adopt a flat 91, the 88 is definitely wrong. And so I think we need to correct that. Once I realized that the 88 was wrong, I had the consultant go back and see if that same error was made throughout the plan, and it was. And so I've provided a proposed update to that executive summary table that corrects the way that those averages were calculated to a proper weighted average instead of a simple average for all of the different project types. In doing that, it also elucidated one other factor, which was in the calculation of septic system removal by hookup to sewer projects. We had a lot of sewer projects that required expansion, putting in new pipes to new neighborhoods and then hooking people up. Those costs are definitely more than some neighborhoods that already have pressure force mains going through them past homes and businesses where people have not hooked up yet, because under state law you're not required to hook up to a force main, you're only required to hook up to a gravity main. We only budgeted $12,000 a piece for those hookups. We budgeted $20,000 a piece where you have to run the lines as well. And so we needed, in order to not dilute the average cost by those less expensive projects, we needed to break those out separately. So the revised proposed update to the executive summary table is the last table in your handout. And there's sort of, I tried to provide this in a stepwise fashion for how you want to work through adopting changes.
John.
This is good stuff. It's a good deep dive into the numbers. It appears that there needs to be a change in the Lagoon plan to reflect these various studies. The thought I have is, rather than us having a robust discussion on it right now, that you come forward with your best recommendation, perhaps before we get the Lagoon plan change for next year, and tell us what you think is best and why. And one of the considerations is, how do we make it easy and simple? And another one is, if it's tough judgment, but if the politics look like they're too difficult to get down to the last penny, then let's do some smudging. It looks to me like the actual cost is the actual cost, and what we're doing with these numbers is providing a cost estimate that's an entering argument for the negotiations on the interlocal agreement and contracts and so on. So my recommendation, you come to us with your best recommendation as a change to the Lagoon plan itself, and we deal with it at that time.
Well,
That's what she's asking at this point.
the reason that the committee may want to consider it now is that we have the form out there for the community to request substitute projects. Their requests are due December 18th. So if we want to amend the dollars that they are available to request, this would be the time to do that.
So there's two things hanging fire here, right? One is, well, I guess there's three. One is you've updated the cost per pound calculations, which were in error. So seems like we need to publish that. Then you've made this second breakout of existing sewer system versus new sewer system, and that's another. And then the last one is whether we do different stormwater allocations, average countywide or by region. And let me address the last one first, because the first two I think we need to deal with. We just need to have a motion and put that out there. But the whole thing about averages versus, you know, you had it as 3 lagoons, and now we're saying, well, let's maybe do it mainland and beach and something else. And I'm thinking there may be other factors that, just as you discovered factors here with existing sewer plant, not sewer plant, frankly, I'm in favor of just having a countywide average and saying that's what it is. And you know, if you're poor, one of these poor unfortunates that live in a high-cost area, you know, it costs more for your project. But I think, you know, we'll find other differences as well. Yes, ma'am.
Courtney.
I have to disagree with that very much, because if we have a countywide average, all of the areas on mainland are getting a benefit, where all the barrier islands are getting twice a deficit in that. And I just, you know, I have a hard time understanding why we would consider that fair to the barrier island community. I mean,
that whole argument is they should get more money, you know, whatever the reason for their higher costs, they should get a higher allocation because their costs are higher.
that's correct.
Okay.
You know,
Stephanie.
I agree with Courtney. I think that, I mean, honestly, when you look at it, we're talking about, for a mainland community, if we went with the average, they're quote-unquote losing $3, you know. And the barrier islands, if we go with the average, are losing $7 per pound, and yes, per pound per year. And so it really is a very minimal difference when you look at it that way, but we know what the actual costs are. So why should mainland communities, and I live in a mainland community, why should mainland communities get more money than we know it's going to cost? That doesn't make any sense to me. And so I think that we should go with the breakout that has been determined, rather than giving a community a benefit per pound that we know is over what their actual costs are going to be. That, I don't think that's a fair use.
I didn't understand that to be the case. We think it, whatever the number is, $91 a pound on the mainland, that will actually overcompensate them for the stormwater solution.
They have to provide actual invoices, so we would never reimburse more than their actual expenses. But it would allow them to put in and design a slightly more expensive project than what would be funded if barrier island communities were trying to work within the budget.
Okay, Todd.
I guess I agree with both parties here, but to me, but the question is, we're basing off of averages, so inherently we're going to plan for money that's not going to be spent for those projects that were more cost effective, and we haven't made those plans for money that were above the average. But I agree with Terry, the geography is but one of the potential factors. So for me, it's less of it. I don't disagree with the fact that geographically it may make sense to figure out a way to help move these projects forward, because that's our intent, and these projects are already in the plan. But I do think it applies to potentially many other factors as well. So that's my only concern, is I hesitate to just jump on that one geographic factor when there may be a lot of other complex factors that weigh in.
And the geography is the only factor we know so far.
Right, and there's bound to be others come up. So that's my concern, is inherently we know that that everything that's above the average that was written into the plan is gonna suffer from these.
Point of order. The motion was made last time was for you to come back to us with a model that considered all major factors. We didn't define major factors. You haven't done that yet. The motion still stands, it was passed. So we haven't seen your model, we don't have a staff recommendation, give us our best shot. Give us your best shot, and give us your recommendation that considers all major factors. Maybe you say it's too hard, and if it's too hard, it's too hard. If you think we need to adjust for different kinds of sewer hookups, or just for longitude, or what have you, do that. But until you come back to us with a response to that motion, you haven't responded to the motion.
John and then Courtney.
I believe that fundamentally Virginia's group has responded to the motion. I support where Courtney's position. There are a lot of other factors, I agree, but we've identified this one early. Our goal is to incentivize the communities throughout the county to take on these projects. If I'm sitting in a, and I'm not, but if I was in a city government somewhere and I knew that to submit for a project for $1 million it was going to cost me $1.5 million, I'm not going to submit, I'm not going to participate. Our goal is to get the cities to participate. So if it costs more on the beaches for whatever reasons, we should pay at that level, even though it's an average. And again, we're reimbursing once it happens.
And I just wanted to, you know, that what we have here is a known factor, and basically based on data that we know, and it basically says that on the barrier islands it costs more to do a project. So when we apply for funds, we get less of that simply because we're using an average, and it just doesn't make sense. You know, you have areas like Cocoa Beach where a large majority of the sales tax is actually generated, and for them to get a lesser share of that simply because it's more expensive to do a project over there, it's just not fair to that community. So, you know, I have to agree. You have a mainland, Merritt Island, and Barrier Island known estimated total project cost in the cost per removal. Why can't we just use that?
Charles.
Yeah, and I would say too, I think the staff did come back with what we asked them. You know, we asked them for a rock, they brought a rock back. Do we not like this rock? I mean, so I think we have some data now that we can help estimate, and this is a evolving document, you know, as we get more information. You know, we can maybe integrate more variables into it, but you know, this is the best model that we have. And, you know, I think what Courtney was saying, the revenue from the beach side with the tourists coming in, they said where a lot of the money's coming from. It's the fact of reality, property's more expensive on the mainland than it is on Merritt Island, and it is on the Barrier Island versus Merritt Island versus the mainland. So I support what the staff brought to us to look at.
Okay. Okay, Stephanie.
I move that we go with the breakdown that's here, and that we reimburse at the rate for mainland of $87.99, Merritt Island $89.02, and the Barrier Island at $98.63.
Is there a second?
Second.
And any more discussion? John?
Yes.
Oh,
Please.
yeah, and so 3 categories, 3 different rates. What if the Cocoa Beach area decides next year that since they generate more sales revenue than the South Beaches area, that they deserve a special change in their allocation, and they come back and say, now we need 4 categories, and then 5 categories, and then 6 categories. This is going to continue on, and I warned about this when we first talked about this. As soon as you make this differentiation, you're going to have other people looking for ways to get more of the money, and they'll come up with reasonable justifications for it. My preference would still be the single. I can live with 3, but what's to stop this going to 5 or 7 or 10 categories, making the county's job almost impossible in trying to manage these grants, or these contracts, excuse me.
Courtney?
The idea that we're basing it on the revenues, that was just a point I was making. The reason why we're basing this on is because it's based on the cost of the project in those areas, and that's the data we're basing it on. It has nothing to do with the revenues. I was just making the point that it would be unfair to those communities because it does cost them more. And quite frankly, they generate that area, that revenue in a greater percentage. So that was the point. I don't think the point was that we're going to start delineating areas of revenue throughout the county. What we're basing it on is cost and the cost of the project. And that's the only reason why we're delineating them. It's because those communities, it costs them more to build those projects.
And how much more does it complicate the county's work with having 3 different prices? I mean, is that that's not as significant?
We will have to have 3 versions of the form for stormwater projects. We'll have to make sure that each entity that's applying for these projects is using the right form and that the contracts are applying the right dollar amount.
The problem we had the last time we went forward with 3 sets of numbers is it bounced at the county commission. This motion says, let's give them 3 different numbers and see what happens. There's no justification behind it. There's no argument. There's no backing. I think this is not ripe for action at this time. What I would like to see, if this motion does not pass, is you to come back with a clean recommendation. This, here's why, here's why, here's why, something that's enough bulletproof that it can be handed from this committee as a recommendation to the county commission, rather than saying, here's a different set of numbers, go with that. Because you're going to get the same argument back.
Stephanie and then John.
I don't think that's the issue. The issue is not that there isn't justification. There is absolutely justification for this. There is data to back this up. The political issue is that certain members of the county commission feel that their area is not eligible for as much money. But the bottom line, as Courtney said, is if you really go back and look at what's being generated, then those areas are not generating as much either. And so we are looking at actual costs. And when you evaluate it, some of those areas in the individual county commissioners are both Barrier Island and or Merritt Island, and some are mainland. So we're not making a distinction based upon districts, which was the whole issue to begin with. Is District 1 getting more money than District 3, and is District 3 getting more money than District 5? Because they both have some Barrier Islands and or Merritt Island communities and some mainland communities, it's not by district that the discrimination, so to speak, is taking place. And I think that this is a different argument, a different issue. I'm not saying that there might not be controversy about it. And then they can look at doing the 9119, but we've made our recommendation, and I believe it's a good recommendation.
Okay. And John?
I support Stephanie's proposal. I think it is justified based on cost. The revenue discussion is wholly irrelevant.
Yeah, keep it up.
I agree.
The discussion of minor political boundaries is wholly irrelevant. What matters is what it costs to put these programs in place. We have average costs that have been justified. This supports that concept. We should move forward.
Okay, and then Todd, did you have your hand up?
Yeah, I just, in essence, we're raising the number too. I mean, and we may have extra funds. And one of my questions is, if I take off my jurisdiction hat and I put on just purely my Lagoon hat, the question is if we are spending more funds on a barrier island and we're just paying more per pound of nitrogen, is that a good decision? And I understand the politics of it, but one of the other approaches to this is we do have excess revenue coming in, and the average is just a number. Should we use a slightly higher percentile for a threshold to get projects moving forward if that would encourage individuals wherever they're located to move projects forward, and it would allow a slightly higher funding level to make sure we're getting money spent moving projects forward. I know that's a different approach, but it's just a concept, because I do struggle a little bit with just because of location-wise, it is a higher cost per pound of nitrogen being removed.
Courtney?
I just, when this went back to the county commission previously, there was the instance where some communities may have been at a lesser cost. So I could see their concern with that is that, we're bringing a different, way of doing it that in some instances communities would feel like they're losing something. And the previous average was $88, correct? And now the lowest number for mainland is $87.99, which is basically $88. So nobody's losing anything now. Basically, and the reason why it's changed is because the math was wrong. So now the math is correct. It's based on location and actual costs, and it's based on data. So I'm not real sure how better we could get that done. And address the beachside concerns, because this all occurred originally because there was a beachside concern that our project costs more than the rest, and here we're getting a lesser average.
Okay, John?
I'm supportive of the notion of having a location-based breakup, and that's probably all the major factor we need, although there's this other wrinkle with sewer hookups that probably in it too. My concern continues to be if all we give them is numbers, that we've done nothing except change the numbers. I think if we captured Courtney's last soliloquy and put that at the top, that would be very useful. I'm concerned not with the numbers in this motion, but rather that there's nothing else attached to it that says, hey, let's come up with a robust justification that brings tears to their eyes instead of just saying, here's new numbers.
John, the criticism that I saw in the commission had more to do with people feeling they weren't getting as much as other people. It wasn't a justification of the average number, whether the number was too much or too little. It was, I think we're getting cheated. Well, that's not it. It's about what it costs to do these projects. We now have justifiable numbers since there was an error found. Nobody's going to get any less. I am concerned that we are going to spend a little bit more on this overall project, and I don't know what that amount is, but the money's there to do it. We need to move forward because the cities, municipalities, individuals have projects that they have to put in 30 days. They need to know where. The staff needs to know the formula to put in. We need to move this forward.
Okay. Go ahead, then we need to call the questions in.
I see Courtney's side completely, and I understand the real estate cost, but what Todd is saying, that we're looking at the cost of pounds for nitrogen, and overall we want the most bang for our buck for the whole entire lagoon, and it shouldn't matter where you live. We're looking at the lagoon as a whole to clean it up, and I'm completely stuck. So I feel like if we're moving forward and we need a vote, I need to hear a little bit more.
Okay, Virginia, maybe you can
I just
add
want to
light.
clarify that these costs are based on 84 stormwater projects that were identified in the plan. And the total cost for those 84 projects identified in the plan was $10,800,000. So under the original executive summary table, $10,800,000. In the revised summary table, $10,800,000. What this changes is the formula that would be used for reimbursing partners who request substitute projects. So the $88 error would have potentially brought in substitute projects that we paid less for. And so the total cost of the plan would have come down if cities brought in substitute projects and were willing to do them for $88. If we change that number to 91, those substitute projects will come in at exactly this $10,800,000. So we are not, with your discussion, increasing the cost of the plan. We are not saving as much as we would have using the previous $88. But I think, your point about what do we need to do to engender the desire to participate is important.
I guess I was just going to throw out, like Todd was saying, an average, and it is based on facts and it is numbers, but what if we took half the range of the mainland and Barrier Island, and we still had one number countywide, and that came in at 95, I think it was 92 or 93. It was half the range from the mainland to the Barrier Island, and then we just called one number. I don't know if that's a good idea or bad idea. I figured I'd throw it out.
Madam Chairman, I move to postpone the motion until our next scheduled meeting. Madam Chairman, I move to postpone the motion to our next scheduled meeting.
And is there a second? But we have a motion on the floor, actually.
That's right, and
This takes
I'm
precedence.
allowed to make a motion to postpone it under Robert's rules.
It requires a second, though.
Yes, it does.
Do we have a second? Okay. Let's go back to our original motion and call the question. That we recommend that all three of these figures be used in determining the incentives. Actually, maybe you want to restate the question, Stephanie. The motion.
The motion is to go with the breakdown of mainland, Merritt Island, Barrier Island costs, the costs that are listed in the table, that we would reimburse at those three rates based upon the location.
Okay. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Okay, the motion passes.
Madam Chair?
Yes.
If the committee wants, I would be glad to be at the county commission meeting to speak, to make sure they understand our point as a committee, if that's something you all want to do. Because is that okay to do that, do you think? Yes. Is it? Okay. I didn't know if that's something the staff would be upset about, but I think that would be important for, in some of the things that we have moving forward, if from now on we have at least somebody here that would go to the meeting to answer their questions from a committee perspective. So.
I would support Courtney going better than me.
Okay. Great. Okay, Virginia?
So is the committee comfortable, and maybe this doesn't require a motion, but we want to correct the errors in the plan in the next update. So we will certainly correct those averages. I would like your input on dividing out the sewer connections versus the sewer extensions.
We need a motion, and I think we need to approve that action. But I'm not voting, so.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Okay. And that would be, okay, so we're good to go.
So meeting schedule?
For the next, yeah.
So continuing on with meeting on the third Friday of the month at 8:30 in the morning. This is, you have the list of when those dates fall out. The one that leaps off the page is December 21st. Thinking you may not want to meet on December 21st, we could either agree that we're going to take that month off, or we could go ahead and put it on the calendar now, and you can make that decision later.
I would suggest you leave it on the calendar.
Yes.
We can cancel it later. That's going to be about the time the proposals are coming in for next year, right? And
Right.
if you have any last minute details that you need to get sorted out before, believe me, I love canceling meetings. It's one of my favorite things to do.
I agree with John.
Also,
Reluctantly.
we can also address, if we need to move it the week before, I mean, that's a year away. We can make that decision later if we need to do that.
Okay, do we need a motion to adopt the calendar then? So I can make the motion then that we adopt the calendar as presented.
Second.
That would be
Charlie.
Charles. And all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. And now, item B on the new business.
Do you, I'm looking, you wanted to try to wrap up discussion at 9:45, so
9:48.
Right.
do you want to continue down the agenda as written, or do you want to table some items?
I recommend we table the rest of new business.
Can it be tabled? Is there something that's time sensitive?
The sewage overflow issue is going to the county commission on December 5th. I could certainly make sure that they have this memo or some variation on this that explains what your previous recommendations were and where you were on this issue.
I liked it.
Ms. Bowden at the previous meeting was concerned about continuing extension projects, especially in, I think, this service area when we have an overflow problem. There is one extension project to the South Beaches sewer plant that is in the plan. It was funded at $840,000, which is remarkably similar to the $841,000 that would sort of be the value if we could stop these overflows from happening at the scale that they have been happening and the frequency that they have been happening. So that would be one way to fund it, or the other one that you have discussed is using these dollars that are coming in over projections.
Yeah, okay. Start with John and then Stephanie.
Yeah, I really find myself conflicted on this. When I supported the tax in the most basic way, it was to reduce the inflow of pollutions into the river and to clean up what we had. And correct me if I'm wrong, but there's something like 1,500, probably 1,000 direct flows, there's a stormwater outfalls into the lagoon, and that's what we were going to clean up. I understand that it's certainly very public when we have sewage lines back up during things like Irma, and that wasn't just here, it was in Orlando, it was throughout the entire state. These kind of problems occurred. They're visible. I'm not sure how significant they are, but they do contribute. But I'm not sure that was the intention of the people that supported the tax, was an infrastructure that should be fixed by other taxes or rates. So I don't know where to go on this one, to be honest with y'all. Very conflicted.
Okay, Danielle.
So my concern is and was that we're paying for the hookup when we don't have the data on the exfiltration from the house to the sewer line, and then how much exfiltration we have currently in our sewer lines, and we're paying to hook our septic tanks up to those sewer lines without the data.
So what we heard in the reports were estimates.
Yeah, and I think it's important to know that in this report, we're talking about the non-utility owned areas. So it would be similar to like funding a septic tank hookup, you know, very similar in nature when you're thinking about it. And so I agree. I very much disagree with using any other source to fund the county's utility other than the county's utility rates. I mean, and I think that any discussion beyond that it needs to be had by the county commission, and I think a very public one, because I would definitely be disagreeable with using this funding source or any other funding source for that matter than just the county utility rates. But in this instance, this is not the county's utility side. This is the private resident side. So this is, in my opinion, very similar to what we would do when we are hooking up a septic tank. So I think this would be a good use of funds, but I would hate to see this take up another project, you know what I'm saying? Like move another project off the line, because we put a lot of effort into our projects in the list, and so I would hope that we could look at, you know, maybe the other additional funds coming in to fund that, or even look at other funding sources besides just this, you know, and the other grant sources, you know, so that's just my 2 cents. I don't think that this has anything to do with fixing the utility itself.
I think we've identified as a third rail that we don't want to step on, using Lagoon money to substitute for funding that already has a placeholder, a line item in various budgets, government budgets. And I absolutely agree with you. The hookup to sewer lines, the repair of septic tanks, et cetera, is in the Lagoon plan as it is now. There's a question of adjusting the funding. We don't have any request to adjust the funding. We don't have substitute projects in front of us right now. There could be in the future. I think we should stay the course. The plan's a plan until the plan changes. Then the new plan's the plan. I think we should stay with the plan as it is written and do nothing more with this.
Stephanie.
The one project, the South Beaches project, correct me if I'm mistaken, that project was brought to us by a private individual? No.
No, that you're thinking of one in Miko, so South Mainland.
Okay. I do agree with everything that's been said. I think that it's very important that we go ahead and make those conversions. And South Beaches is one of the prime areas that has not, we know that there are issues down there that have not been addressed. And I would hate to see us eliminate those projects.
Can I was actually going to, when this item came up, suggest that we wait, because the county hasn't even presented their findings to the public. And I can't tell you how many times on Facebook I posted, yes, there was 20 million gallons released from the pipe, but it wasn't all sewage. And that was proven by the numbers, or at least shown to us, that the county presented on what numbers is raw sewage, and that was only 1,800 pounds of total nitrogen. When our plan is to remove 800,000 pounds, that's like 0.2%. So I've been saying that for weeks on Facebook, trying to give people the information. So on this item alone, I was going to say we should wait till the county does their presentation, get that information out to the public, and then see where it goes from there. But I also didn't know, the county presented on this maybe in 2013 or 2014 about their 10-year plan to repair the pipes. They have a line item every year for the next 10 years. And in my mind thinking, I didn't know, I know that there's going to be asks to use the money from here, but I didn't know what the committee's appetite would be for lending some of the money from the plan to get those projects of the sewage pipes moving quicker. And I don't even know legally and financially if it can be done
I don't think
for the
they
money
need
to
it.
come back.
I don't even think they need it, though.
Okay.
They very clearly said that they would do, it's a matter of prioritization. And I think they're going to present that at the December 5th workshop. In this body, we asked for a workshop and we got it. So I'm not real sure we have to do anything more until they have their meeting, you know. So.
Yeah.
The coin of the realm that we deal with are projects, either in the plan or substitute projects that are brought before us. Until then, I don't think we have any action.
I agree.
Okay. So then we need a motion to look at, we will table the rest of the items under new business.
I move to postpone the rest of the items under new business until our next scheduled meeting.
Okay, and second.
Second.
Charles seconded the motion. All those in, I'm sorry.
We were holding off, we have 2 new videos.
Yeah.
We were holding off on posting them on social media until you saw them first.
Okay.
You want us to go ahead and post them?
How long is the video?
They're
about 2 minutes.
2 minutes each.
Can we go ahead and postpone the rest and go ahead and view those videos right now before we go to public discussion?
They can post them. We need to view
Get them emailed to them and then we post them on Monday.
Okay, great.
Sure.
Want to do that?
Great.
Okay.
Okay, all those in favor of postponing the rest of the agenda? Say aye. Aye. Opposed? Okay. And we'll open it up to general public comment. See, we have George. Anybody else? Okay, great.
Thank you, Ms. Claus. My name is George Rosenfield. I am retired environmental scientist. First off, I want to congratulate Terry Casto on this talk he presented to the Marine Resources Council last week. It was excellent. However,
There's always a but.
no, it was great. He did a marvelous job. He mentioned the hands across the lagoon on the bridge, but he did not mention the first one. He mentioned the most recent one. The first one was back before 1990, where 5 bridges all along the whole 150 miles of the lagoon, 5 major bridges, were covered with hands across the lagoon. Aerial photographs were taken. It was sent to the governor. The governor put up the package and sent it to EPA, and EPA gave the county $3 million to start the National Estuary Program. So I think it was very important that took place. I mentioned also that I had received from a friend a copy of a letter from Professor of Economics, Dr. Randall Holcomb from Florida State University, indicating that the residential development cost counties in Florida more than they ever received from taxes due to all the work that has to be done through the county, including police protection, fire departments, health, infrastructure, and everything else. So they never make up the cost of what it actually is to have development. And I bring it up again here. I think the county commission is sabotaging our efforts here that we're trying to do to save the Indian River Lagoon. And they do that by approving all of these new developments that are going in, especially the ones up in North Merritt Island. I had attended the local planning commission first meeting on that 25 acres, which is half wetland, and a tremendous amount of housing going in, all on septic tanks. And we're trying to get rid of the septic tanks, and they approved it. The second planning commission meeting approved it, and the county approved it. Yeah, the county commission approved it. And the other thing is the Southwest, excuse me, the Southwest Expressway. I got a big write-up in the paper the other day, and it's been open, the part of it, and how wonderful it is. The paper said that to take a lot of traffic off of the roads and get them out of Palm Bay and things like that. And then the paper mentioned, I wish I cut it out and saved it, said, and it also is going to open up the Plattlands for development. And 5 years ago, when that first raised its head about building that Southwest Expressway, I mentioned to proper people, it's nothing but a subterfuge to develop the Plattlands. They are a little bit jealous of the Duda descendants who are getting all the money from developing the Duda property. And the county also is not suing the cities for dumping all the sewage. It may be only a small number of pounds of nitrogen out of what they dumped with the 21 million gallons of raw sewage, but visitors and people in the county and visitors to the county who bring in money and love the Indian River Lagoon don't like the smell, and they don't want raw sewage floating past their boats when they're out doing fishing or anything like that. I think I've taken up enough time. Thank you very
George.
much.
Okay. Do we have final comments? I did want to thank Lou's here with the Indian River Lagoon Coalition. I wanted to thank you for the monthly report that you've been doing. and draw attention to it. I actually asked the League of Women Voters to start linking to this report. I think it's a good synopsis, and I call it my cheat sheet to review what we've actually accomplished. I did want to correct one thing on the report last year, and I'll make a point of looking at these closer and pointing any differences I see to you, but it says that the Citizen Oversight Committee awarded the $1 million contract to the Marine Resources Council, and in fact, that was Brevard County, so it was not actually the Citizen Oversight Committee.
We don't have any money.
Do we have other comments, or?
I'm sorry.
Go ahead, did you?
Yeah, I will check with you on these issues.
Well, you don't, I'm sure other members will be looking at it too. I may not catch everything, but anyway, just to clarify that, and thank you for doing that. Thank you for all of the citizen involvement. Really appreciate that. Okay, and this meeting is adjourned. Well, actually, onward to the tour.
I would love to, but I can't take off work.
The opinions expressed by any member of the public during any period of public comment do not necessarily reflect the views or opinions of the Board of County Commissioners of Brevard County, Florida, Space Coast Government Television, or the program sponsor, and are solely those of the presenter. The Board of County Commissioners of Brevard County, Florida, Space Coast Government Television, and the program sponsor hereby expressly disclaim any and all responsibility or liability for any defamatory or slanderous statements expressed by any member of the public during any such period.